Well, thank you for coming for Dr. Garcia. I'm sure he's with us here in the room and appreciates everyone celebrating his life. There's a picture that was made by a student on Ray's office door, and it's hand drawn, and it's a beautiful picture of Ray. But what particularly attracted me to it was the fact that the heart in that picture is about 3 times the size of a normal heart. And I think that's great because it really shows how Ray felt about his family, about his colleagues, and about his students. Ray, as we have mentioned before, or others have mentioned before, had a military background, and it was very easy to know that he was in the building of where I worked at. The elevators are somewhat far away from the offices where Ray and I have. We have offices right next to each other, and as soon as you open the doors of the elevator, you can actually hear this booming voice reverberating throughout the hallway, and you go, "Wow, that's Ray talking to a student." You don't hear the student's voice; you just hear Ray's voice. So, and Ray, when he talks to you, it can be very intense. And a new colleague of ours that just joined the department a few years ago said that, after a conversation with Ray, you feel like dropping to the floor and giving him 20 push-ups. It's just incredibly intense. And once in a while, if you talk to him, he gets really intense. You actually feel his hand on your shoulder. He's making a point. Love the guy. Of course, no one, I don't think, can go through any of these talks without talking about his passion for his students. Even when it was towards the end for Ray, a few months before that, we would have conversations about the diagnosis of the disease and what were the next steps, given my background at City of Hope in cancer research. And invariably, Ray would turn the conversation to his students, and he was concerned about Jeremiah's write-up for his master's program and making sure that the commas are okay and the dangling participles are all right. That was more what Ray was interested than in actually talking about his own health at the time. Ray, even towards the very end. So my wife and I happened to be able to visit Ray in his home about 8 days before he passed. At this point, the cancer had metastasized to several parts of his body, and he was on heavy medication for pain. And it wasn't the same Ray that we had all been used to. This very vocal, talking rapidly. So he was much more subdued, and he had his eyes closed. And I asked him if he was in any pain, and he slowly said no pain. And he also we had a couple other exchanges. But then I told him that his former student, Edgar, who's in the audience here right now, he transferred over to my lab, and I was able to tell Ray that, Edgar did a great job defending his prospectus, which is one of the steps you have to do in the master's program. And at that point, even though Ray's eyes were still closed, he had this great smile. And he goes, "Oh, that's good. That's good." You just hear that. And that's what brought happiness to Ray. Ray was also passionate about science. His experiments were sometimes funded from his own funds, from his own personal finances to keep his research going. That's how much he cared about the research that he was doing. We would have long conversations about the effects of jojoba oil on LCAT and on HDL and LDL levels, and what was being heightened or decreased. And he was a stickler also for statistics. You had to know your statistics when you talked to Ray, and so he was passionate about that. And so Ray had, again, towards the end of his disease, he had given permission for his tumor to be taken and genetically analyzed. And Ray had told me, you know what, it might be too late for me, Guy, but maybe this type of analysis can help others. That's the kind of person that Ray is. And so I thought that we have others here. I thought that I would talk a little bit about that particular piece of tumor that was analyzed by a company called Foundation One in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So it turns out, first of all, I need to preface this by saying that the type of cancer that Ray had is not likely to be inherited. Okay, so that's one thing clear. It's probably a spontaneous cancer, which 90 to 95% of the cancers are out there. So it's probably an isolated event in his family. The genetic analysis had shown that there were two spots. Well, first of all, they analyzed it for about 100 different genes for which there are drug targets, which are drug targets. And 2 of the 100 that were looked at were found to be defective in Ray's cancer. One of them codes for a protein that remodels the chromatin. And the other one codes for 3 sets of proteins. They're very easy to remember: P14, P15, and P16. And 2 of those genes are actually responsible for restraining what's known as the cell cycle. And what that means is they are inhibitors for kinases, a set of enzymes, that will go along and phosphorylate proteins to tell the cell to keep on dividing. So basically, Ray's tumor lacked those particular genes which would produce those proteins, which would inhibit the cell growth. Classic tumor suppressor proteins. And it turns out also that there are some phase 2 clinical trials being done for those particular, for drugs that will target those kinases that probably ran amok in Ray's tumor. Now, this is not to say that perhaps those drugs would have worked. There are tremendous side effects. Also, tumors are heterogeneous, and so there could have been many other mutations and alterations that could have caused that cancer to divide uncontrollably. But I think Ray would have appreciated the fact that that type of knowledge is being disseminated to you all, and maybe in the future, as personalized medicine gets better, that kind of information can be used for intelligent decisions that we can make in the future. I think Ray would have enjoyed that, would have known that he had contributed to the betterment of humanity. So, in sum, Ray is a man bursting with life. He cared tremendously about others. And when I close my eyes, I can hear his voice still in my ears. And I can see his smile from ear to ear. And I can feel the grasp of his hand on my shoulder. So next we have our newest professor in the department, Dr. Cecilia Zarita Lopez.